does homosexuality and homosexuals like yourself find themselves in the new America you wish to build? You wanting to, quote, eradicate transgenderism.
Transgenderism ought to be eradicated from public life entirely, the whole preposterous ideology at every level.
Were you circumcised?
That's a little bit forward. Usually, you have to buy me a drink first. What do you, just if you know, okay. I think it's very telling that she ran away before she could answer any of those questions.
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. In this video, we are going to be watching Michael Knowles take on some of the worst in terms of college social justice warriors in a recent, newly released Young America Foundation speech. They really do try and throw all of the disingenuous tactics at our boy Smooth Mickey, and he is having none of it. So with that, let's get into the first one.
Hello, Michael. I have never spoken at any of these Q&A portions before. This is my first time.
Welcome. Good to have you.
Thank you. So before I came to this event, I actually did a lot of research on you as a person. I saw you graduated from Yale, which congratulations, for history and Italian.
And Italian, yes.
Nice,
Sì,
nice.
davvero. Tu hai ragione.
Oh, impressive. I actually, yeah, that's really cool. I love Italian food. I love Italian. Beautiful language. And I also saw that you've been quite successful on YouTube. You have 2.3 million subscribers, 1.1 million followers on X or Twitter.
I could have 2.4 or 2.5 tonight if you all subscribe in this room.
But I was personally wondering where your film career went, because among the research I did on you, I found a sweet little student film you made about 12 years ago called House of Shades, where you engage with homosexual relations with another man, showing yourself naked in bed with another man.
Excuse me, I think that character was bisexual.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. I was wondering, where does homosexuality and homosexuals like yourself find themselves in the new America you wish to build?
I think you slipped something in there. There was a little.
But where? Because you mentioned LGBTQ people, but you oftentimes just focus on transgender people. There's 3 other letters in that acronym, all being some sort of like gay, homosexual. Just wondering where you find, again, homosexuality, which you may or may not find yourself a part of.
Yeah, wait, hold on. You keep slipping that in there. Hold on. You understand, acting is where you play pretend, right? Yeah. There was one time, as an actor, I was in a TV show where I played the guy who blew up the Hindenburg. But I did not blow up the Hindenburg. Yeah. I do not arrest me for blowing up any Zeppelins in the sky.
Yeah, but where do you find homosexuals or homosexuality in this new America that you see yourself?
Well, what you do, I mean, putting your jokes aside, you do make a good point, which is that you can't neatly separate the L from the G, from the B, from the T, because it all shares the same anthropology, which is that men and women are basically the same. And it actually goes deeper even than the LGBT movement or the transgender movement now. I think it goes back to feminism, which makes much the same claim. So the feminist movement says that a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle, that men and women can do exactly the same things, they're exactly as strong, they're exactly as delicate, they're exactly the same. And so if that's the case, then obviously the union of a man and a woman would be the same as the union of a man and a man or the union of a woman and a woman. So it would follow logically from that premise that you would redefine marriage, that you, who knows, I mean, at a certain point you might redefine marriage to be 3 men or 3 women or 5 ladies and a billy goat or something. I don't know what it would be, but there's no limiting principle on it with the LGBT movement. But I suppose I would recommend an alternative perspective, which is a more traditional or classical perspective, which is that the sexes are not identical and indiscernible, but rather complementary, that men really have something to offer women, and women really have something to offer men. And while we bicker sometimes, actually men and women really are for each other, that man is a social creature, and that man is also a coupling creature, and that their love, ideally a loving relationship between the two, can become so real that it actually results in another human being. No other human relationships can result in that. So I think that's a really beautiful thing. I think that tells you something about man's purpose and, you know, what we're for. Just as this microphone is to bring my dulcet tones to your ears, just as my watch is for telling the time, so too my sexuality is for something. It's not just to, you know, get titillated on a Friday night or something. It's for some purpose. And there can actually be fruitfulness to those relationships. And so I would encourage that. And for people who have aberrant views or desires or whatever, I'm not suggesting we send the purity police to drive anybody crazy. I like to think, having been an actor, which you mentioned, that I can quite easily sympathize with other people, and whether that's being a little light in the loafers or whether that's blowing up the Hindenburg, things that I don't personally do, but I can sympathize with people. But what I would recommend is not allowing one's aberrant desires to cloud their view of human nature, or to lead them into ideologies that will result in great suffering. You know, in the case of homosexuals, many homosexuals still desire to have a child, but that is impossible in the union of two men or two women. So in order to accommodate people's natural desires but unnatural behaviors, we've now created a whole industry that goes out and purchases the eggs of a woman, usually a woman in relatively desperate straits, then goes and finds a woman, often in even more desperate straits, rents her womb, and then intentionally creates lots of children, most of whom will be destroyed, but maybe one or two of them will survive and be implanted, and then grows that baby and then rips the baby away from the only mother he's ever known in order to satisfy the disordered and unrealistic desires and perceptions of people who have just become clouded by their own self-absorption. And I think that's not good for anybody. I sympathize, I understand why people go astray, but I don't think that's to be recommended. I think the social cost of it is much too high, and I don't think it really leads to flourishing.
So I understand that is your take on homosexuality, LGBTQ, like that kind of stuff. But my question was, how does that fit into this vision? Because YIF, from what I understand, is trying to secure conservative values and push a conservative narrative so that, you know, America keeps its like original foundational values, whatever you think those foundational values are. My question is, along like the ideas of you wanting to, quote, eradicate transgenderism, how does homosexuality and those people fit into this new America? I understand that you have your ideas about whether it's natural, whether it's good, whether it's fruitful, whether it's aberrant, but like how does it fit into your new America?
Yeah, sure. Well, again, I wouldn't call it a new America. I'd call it America as it was until about 5 minutes ago. You know, I don't think it's all that new. However, I think you're raising a good question, because people either misunderstood me or just believed the lying media that defamed me in many cases. But when one says transgenderism ought to be eradicated from public life entirely, the whole preposterous ideology at every level, or something thereabouts, you know, one is obviously speaking, as I just said, about an ideology. And the reason it has to be eradicated is because it posits a false view of human nature. It just doesn't describe the truth. Whereas when you describe something like homosexuality, by which I assume you mean, you know, a couple of fellas going, or a couple of ladies going and playing basketball together, or something, I don't know, whatever, you know, the two things that they do. You know, you're talking about behaviors among people that's rather different than an ideology, right? You're not talking about a competing conception of human nature exactly. You're not talking about a competing conception of the relation between the body and the soul. You're not talking about castrating little kids. You're just saying that, you know, some guys like dancing the YMCA outside of a Trump rally. At a Trump rally, it's completely straight, but outside of a Trump rally, it's a little bit more suspect. And so that's what you're saying. And so I don't know. I mean, what would happen with that? I guess, I don't know, it would be treated the way it's always been treated. It's just, you know, it's like a little bit eccentric and probably not to be encouraged,
I was just asking,
but whatever.
because you seem to have like a lot of plans or a lot of ideas about how things should go, and I was wondering if any of that fit into your plans or ideas of how the world should be, how America should be.
Yeah, but that's my answer.
Thank you for your definitions.
Certainly, yeah. It was a good question. You did call me a homosexual, but other than that, it was a good question.
So just completely disingenuous from the jump here. And there are a few things that we have to observe. Firstly, why do these people insist on wearing masks? Just think about how ridiculous this is. You're coming to this conservative event to show your rebellion, and the way in which you show your rebellion is to do exactly what the government tells you when it's not even necessary anymore, and it's been over for like 3 years. Secondly, I'm pretty sure she had some sort of a dom-sub relationship going on with the little guy next to her. I mean, my man did not say a single word the whole time. He came dressed in all black with his mask and his hood up, looking like he is either going to try and firebomb the place, or he's about to go home and she's going to put a lead on him and walk him around on all fours. I mean, out of pure curiosity, I was really hoping that he'd say something, but no, I guess we'll die wondering. Next, her initial claim was that she's done all of this research before the show.
So before I came to this event, I actually did a lot of research.
She knows how many subscribers he has got on YouTube and how many Twitter followers he has got. Some big time research there. And also she's come across some groundbreaking news that nobody else obviously knows about. But those of you who have seen us cover Smooth Mickey before, especially these Q&As, will have known what was about to come out of her mouth. And like a broken record, she said the exact same thing to him that all of the other activists who have all done their research come and say to him as well. And they all think that they've done something new. He was in a movie where he pretended to be gay, and now, as a conservative commentator, he doesn't kiss the ass of everybody who identifies as LGBT. Ha! Gotcha. Now, I won't insult your intelligence by explaining to you the flaws in this logic. I think Michael Knowles did a good job of that. But what I will say is that it is incredible what these people consider to be a lot of research. On to the next one now, where this activist shares a lot of similarities with the previous ones. But before we get there, guys, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Plus, guys, it's nearly Christmas. It's coming up, and we have got the most base merch in the entire world on the reality-based store. I want to point your attention to these counterculture designs. I wore them on the whatever podcast you might have seen with Andrew Wilson, and I've had a lot of people asking about these designs. They are original designs. They're on the store. So all you got to do is click those links right below in the bio or the comments, and you can check out all of our original designs on the reality-based store today. Let's get back to the video.
Yeah, I just have a really quick question. You've talked a lot about child genital mutilation, and I just want to ask you: have you been were you circumcised?
That's a little bit forward. However, usually, you have to buy me a drink first before you get to that sort of answer. But I was born in the era when most American boys were circumcised, and I don't see any moral problem with it.
Okay, yeah, that was all. That was my only question.
Right?
This will be the final question.
That's fine. I guess, I suppose that should impel some further explanation, I guess. I think the implication from the questioner is that if one engages in a practice that has been done for virtually all of history, that does not impair one's sexual function, that by some traditional accounts would actually improve it, that would be the same as gelding a 5-year-old. And I don't see that. I don't see the analogy there. Perhaps we should be more specific, though, when we talk about child mutilation or whatever. We're not talking about tattoos. Well, we don't want kids to have tattoos either. We're not talking about earrings. We're talking about something very specific, which is castrating little kids in furtherance of an ideology that will probably lead them to early death. That's what's wrong. So I don't think we need to ban the Jews or, the American Protestants who do that as well. I think we need to be very specific in our terms. But I find the pro-trans crowd doesn't like to get specific because the details and the specificity of what they do is ghastly.
So once again, guys, we have the activists coming up with the masks as a sign of their rebellion. I mean, why else would you want to hide your face? If you're coming up here and you're speaking truths and speaking truth to power, if you're fighting a just cause, then surely you would not want to hide your face. But then again, if you are coming to ask a question about another man's penis, then perhaps that is good reason to not want that as part of your digital footprint. But now the masks are pretty pathetic and laughable, and the questions themselves are obviously logically deficient. But what I find extremely contemptible is the fact that they will make a statement or ask a question and then run away. There is no sign of a bigger intellectual coward than somebody who does this, somebody who makes these assertions and then runs away from any sort of examination of their worldview.
Question.
Right?
But this is what these leftists do. They will scream and shout and protest, but are terrified of debate because, as has been evidence in this video, they are not very well researched, actually. They don't know what they're talking about, and their worldview completely crumbles under a slight breeze. So instead of engaging with ideas, they will just vilify and pathologize their ideological opponents. And what's even worse is that they will act like righteous crusaders when they do it, as we are about to see in this next very cringeworthy example.
I just want to say that there's a lot that you talk about that I do agree with, specifically the media. But just to address everyone, transgender people are normal. They eat, they sleep, they shit, they love, they are heartbroken, they volunteer in our community, they have jobs, they're really cool. I think it's pretty unfortunate the way social media and media and, fake news makes us think they're something that they're not, but there's a lot of really awesome transgender people in our community, and I would encourage you to enjoy their art, talk to them, get to know them. Maybe it takes a little getting used to because we're indoctrinated to think certain things, but you are smart and you have a heart and you can get used to it. So thank you.
What do you, just if you know, okay. I guess my question, if anybody wants to answer it, is, what do you mean by normal? I guess that's the real question. To say transgenderism is normal seems to undercut the transgender ideology. Because if you look like you're a man, and then you go in, as maybe say at a young age, encouraged by your teachers, and you're told that you have to have invasive surgical procedures to castrate yourself, to remove parts of your body, to advance bone disease, to increase your likelihood of anxiety and stress and suicidality, that seems extraordinary. That seems at the very least like something that we would call abnormal. So I just wonder what is even meant by that. Furthermore, I guess I would ask, what is even meant by a transgender person? My argument, and the argument of conservatives, as far as I can tell, is not that transgender people are bad. It's that there is no such thing as a transgender person, because transgenderism is a false anthropology that gets a fundamental aspect of human nature wrong. Transgenderism says that one's body has nothing to do with one's identity. This is a novel idea. No people have ever really believed this for human history, and there doesn't seem to be much evidence for it. So I guess the question that I would raise is, on what basis are we now all to throw out our previous beliefs, biology, anthropology, philosophy, all traditional religion? On what basis are we to be demanded that we throw all of that out the window and believe that a man could really become a woman and that it is positively good to castrate a little boy? I don't really see that. On what basis are we told that we have to accept the view that a little girl should be forced to change in a public pool dressing room in front of a giant hairy man who pretends to be a woman? On what basis are we to be forced to believe that women are not entitled to their own sports leagues, that women are not entitled to their own spaces, that women are not entitled to any of the rights that they've fought for or have been granted naturally? It all sounds well and good when you say, be nice to the poor transgender people, but nobody's suggesting being cruel to anyone. We're asking what it even means to be transgender, and I think it's very telling that the young woman who made her emotional plea against all of the conservatives, those mean conservatives who believe what everyone else has believed about human beings for all of history, I think it's very telling that she ran away before she could answer any of those questions, because there's no answer, there's no basis for it, and the legitimate rights of people are being destroyed because of an ideology that doesn't help anybody.
So once again, just some of the most contemptible form of intellectual cowardice that there is. I mean, I would actually say that just coming up to the microphone and screaming abuse at Michael and then running away would actually be better than what we just saw, because at least those guys are transparent with what they actually believe and they sort of put their character on full display. That girl, however, was doing this moral grandstanding act where she's encouraging people to open their minds and use their heart and recognize that transgender people can do really good art and they can be good people too. Now, obviously, nobody is arguing that transgender people can't do good art and that these people would have some fantastic and relatable qualities on the individual level, which is why nobody is arguing to the contrary. But these people don't actually want to engage with what Michael Knowles is really saying, because if they did that, then they would have to contend with reality and answer for their worldview, which is obviously a big no-no for them. I mean, just think about it for a moment. Put yourself in the shoes of one of these sort of college social justice warrior activist, septum piercing, blue hair, don't care types. If you do want to be one of the cool kids who's in the cafeteria eating sushi talking about overthrowing capitalism and the patriarchy, then you must be at all moments in a perpetual state of worshipping at the altar of anything that is gay and trans. So if you do want to operate from this delusional paradigm, then how much easier would it be if you simply tell yourself that you think the way you think because you are just ultimately loving and understanding. You have the moral high ground, and the only reason that the conservatives disagree with you or would oppose your worldview is because they're mean and hateful. You are ultimately good and righteous. Your opponents are ultimately reprehensible and bad. But even more so, you are so magnanimous in this situation that you're speaking to them in a way that is not angry, but you're just encouraging them to open up their hearts and minds so that one day, maybe, just maybe, they may be able to also attain the same level of enlightenment and new age consciousness that you have attained. And the best of all is that you never have to get challenged on your ideas. So with that, on to the last bit now, which is a better example of how to pose an objection.
So you've asserted that we have a common understanding of what makes a man or a woman, and that identity is certainly rooted in the body. How does your viewpoint account for instances of things like Klinefelter syndrome or tetragrammatic chimerism, where you have these definitions, as we've come to accept them, certainly called into question? To your point about should we throw out biology too, I think this is a good example of like science is an evolving and living body, and as we learn more, we adapt to these new ideas. So what are we supposed to do, on your view, with somebody who does not have a clear identity based on the biological frame? And then what do we do with that for other people who may be feeling the same thing, but it's not expressed genetically?
Yeah, that's a good question. Often it is expressed genetically. Sometimes there can be genetic abnormalities that make it a little bit difficult to determine at birth what sex a baby is. But there are abnormalities. There's no question about that, albeit not nearly as ambiguous as some of the pro-transgender activists would have us believe. But I think it's also telling that the pro-transgender activists will often point to an entirely distinct and unrelated condition, which is hermaphroditism or intersexuality or Klinefelter syndrome or any of the other chromosomal abnormalities that sometimes blur our distinctions between men and women. The reason that they point to that is because there is absolutely no basis for the ideology which says that one's body has nothing to do with one's identity. And even in the case of, say, I don't know, to use an example, say Turner syndrome, which a girl is born with only one X chromosome, not two X chromosomes. It's not really all that confusing. You know, there's an abnormality, but we know that the person is a girl and they look like a girl and they develop like a girl with some distinctions. I don't think that little ambiguities along the side or defects in, as occur in a fallen world, we all have some defects and some ambiguities about ourselves. I don't think that should blur the line between categorical distinctions. The fact that sometimes animal keepers breed a liger out of a lion and a tiger does not actually destroy the categories of lion and tiger. And in the case of the hermaphroditic abnormalities that you're talking about, it's far more distinct which sex these people are than a liger.
So there we have an actually pretty well thought out objection by this gentleman, whose premise is essentially that intersex people do exist. This points to a biological abnormality where sex becomes more difficult to identify. So how does this reality, as well as people who feel as though their self-identity isn't congruent with their biological sex, affect our relationship with the binary concept of male and female? And are these phenomena a sign that science is evolving such that these archaic views of biological sex are actually becoming obsolete? Well, luckily we can answer this with confidence. And the answer is that these people who are intersex, whatever their intersex condition may be, are still always male or female. Sometimes this is more difficult to tell, but this is just an abnormality. It strays from the normal, and there are so many other examples of this in nature where things stray from normality, but then that doesn't become the norm. Furthermore, people feeling a certain way that has no basis in reality can't redefine reality, because that would obviously be absurd. So guys, hope you enjoyed this one. Another firecracker from our boy Smooth Mickey. Don't forget to check out all of the counterculture designs on the reality-based store. I know you guys will really like them. Like the video if you haven't already, and if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, if you're enjoying this, getting value from it, then you can do so right here. And if you'd like to watch another one, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is RattlesnakeTV, keeping you armed and dangerous.